What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the history of short hair and where it originally started, or when did it become popular to have short hair. So for those of you that have followed my channel for a while, I have made a video about my thoughts on the history of long hair, and those thoughts all remain very prevalent to me in my life, although now, as you can see, I have short hair, and there's a reason for that, and I'll get into that before I start the actual history section of the video. So basically, the reason why I decided to cut my hair short is because I was experiencing some health issues with my scalp, in which my job was affecting my health essentially through just stress and just lack of sleep and a bunch of other little factors that kind of played into just essentially the cortisol spikes and all that stuff that affected the quality of my hair. And so I wanted to restart from scratch, and I have a natural way of doing it. I've done it before, where I just kind of nourish my scalp with a lot of essential oils and vigorously wash my scalp, massage my scalp, all those things. But nonetheless, we're not here to talk about that today. Today we're going to get into the history of short hair. So starting off in the Americas, when we talk about Native American culture, like I've said in my other video, it's very common to associate the typical Native American person with the long flowing hair and all that stuff. And for the most part, that's pretty unanimous from the most northern part of the Americas to the most southern part of the Americas. And essentially throughout the Americas, short hair was not common at all. There might have been a couple tribes that did it by choice for certain hairstyles, that are akin to their particular culture. But in general, most tribes would have long hair, and the only times that they would cut their hair entirely or cut parts of their hair off was for mourning purposes, grieving purposes. This is even very prevalent in the Comanche culture, where they cut parts of their hair when their family members die and things like that. So pretty much all across the Americas, that's very common. And I will clarify that I'm talking about from the perspective of men, because obviously nowadays the norm is that men have short hair. So all these videos that I'm doing, the history of long hair, the history of short hair, have to do with men's hair. And like I mentioned in my previous video, the cutting of the hair was seen as a way to take away the savage aspects of the Native American man during colonization. Now in Polynesia, I know in the last video we talked about the mana and all that stuff, about how long hair is just the customary tradition of most Polynesian cultures, most Australasian cultures, where long hair carries the spirit, it carries the energy. So having short hair was not very common. With that being said, the shorter hairstyles obviously came around the same time as, a lot of the colonial expansion and things like that that happened in the Pacific. So that kind of brought about the customary practice of cutting your hair short. However, in Africa, we do see some examples of short hair not being seen in a negative light. However, most of the time, just like Native American and Polynesian cultures, the aspect of men having long hair or stylized long hair is customary for those regions, for those cultures, pretty much across the continent. And the only situations where people would really cut their hair would be for initiation rites and a lot of spiritual practices, or for also grieving and mourning, same as I've previously mentioned for Native Americans. Now, when it comes to, like I said, there are certain cultures where you do see these examples. And really an example I've come across, at least, is in the Nile Valley. You have the priests and the spiritual classes of the Nile River civilizations, Egypt and Nubia and stuff like that, where their priest classes would often shave their head. And, that was for their particular religious beliefs and practice that kind of symbolized that detachment, that purity, which is very similar to the reason why Buddhists shave their head in parts of Asia. That is a common part there that doesn't originate from colonization. It's a practice that has to do more so with particular spiritual perspective. Now in Europe, this is a very interesting part of this video here, because a lot of people assume that it's just long-standing thing that colonization, all this stuff, that it's just been normal in Europe to always have short hair, but that's not really true. And I know that also a lot of depictions of ancient Greeks and Romans and stuff like that with short hair is normal, right? But actually before the era of Julius Caesar, it wasn't really popular to have short hair as a young man, because for those same reasons, essentially the idea of vitality, strength, masculinity, all of that was still present in a lot of these Mediterranean and European cultures, where it was a good thing to have long hair, long beard, and all that stuff. And basically what happened was that Julius Caesar, having short thinning, balding hair, and often wearing a laurel on his head to cover that, or to stylize his hair as best he could with what little hair he had. He popularized that concept of having short hair that brought about that disciplined look to the Roman army, right? And everybody wanted to be like Julius Caesar, so a lot of people went through with it, and a lot of people started to cut their hair short and shave their face and all of that. Now, in terms of the Celtiberian, Celtic, and Germanic cultures of Western Europe and Northern Europe, the idea of short hair was heavily demonized, actually. It was seen as an association with punishment or enslavement. Now, that same concept can also be found in East Asia, in particular the Korean and Japanese culture. The top knot symbolized essentially like your whole pedigree, your whole ancestry. So for somebody to touch it or for somebody to cut it was seen as a highly offensive thing to do. And it could be punishable by death, especially for people that were tied to very elaborate families, wealthy families. And so short hair, again, was not common really until the industrial and later the modern era. You see, that's when the short hair has kind of taken over as the practical haircut, the professional haircut, all those things. And, like I said in the last video, I don't judge anyone for whatever hairstyle they choose to have. I have my reasons why I want to have my hair as healthy and long as possible, for as long as possible. And yeah, this is just part of the process here, is to cut my hair off. So, I'm not too happy about it, but it's something I need to do along with a few other lifestyle changes and habit changes. And, hopefully I can have some luscious locks here in a few months. But yeah, thank you guys again for watching my video. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. Keep tapping into your roots. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Ashe.